Hey folks, Liz here. Welcome to the second ever episode of Un-Letterboxed, a series which I further dive into my Letterboxd reviews to give a more detailed and elaborate answer as to why I like or dislike a film. And today we are going to be looking at Eephus by Carson Lund. Eephus is Carson Lund's directorial debut, and man does he knock it out of the park for his first ever film. Eephus is one of those films where it reinvents an entire genre that had been tired and worn out, that being the sports genre, if you will, and he really tackles it from an incredibly new perspective, one that trades in cheap jokes that we've seen before for dealing with serious, meaningful issues, such as existential dread or dealing with the loss of your community. It's just one of those films that revolutionizes everything and how I see film in general. So with that, let's dive into Eephus on Letterboxd. Starting with a basic plot outline as a point of reference throughout the duration of the video, Eephus is an incredibly grounded and simple story which really stands out as one of the strongest attributes. It documents the last ever game to take place in a men's recreational baseball league, before the diamond meets its demise, turning a field of dreams into a distant memory. Replacing the field is a middle school, one that will certainly help the local community. So slowly, throughout the course of the film, we see the game unravel. Tensions rise, and an impending sense of doom fills the people playing the game they love for one last time. It truly is the simplicity of Eephus that really shines front and center, especially in our cinematic climate where every movie is a tie-in or a crossover or a multiverse or a setup for a franchise that will never happen. Eephus gives you a couple of hours to breathe, calm down, and enjoy it. It's very akin to baseball itself, might I say. One last note before we dive into the content of Eephus. This is the film that inspired me to even make my Letterboxd account. I just felt it was that great that it warranted me raving about it however I could. So just keep in mind with my review, Eephus really resonated with me at a time where I felt like I had the least amount of community in my life, so bear in mind that I definitely have some personal bias, if you will, toward this film. That being said, I still think Eephus shines in our modern climate, and as a result, I've given it a 5 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd, which is about a 1.5 stars higher than the average review. But once again, as a reminder, I'm not telling you how to think of a film, I'm just telling you my own personal perspective on the film. I always find how you view a film critically important, so with that, I have watched Eephus 6 times over streaming, unfortunately. There were no local theater showings near me, and the reason I find this important is your experience will be different watching in a theater where the sound and visuals are optimized and the peak of what a cinema should be. However, there were no local showings near me, yet despite this negative atmosphere of only being able to watch it on streaming, I still adore Eephus. Starting with the atmosphere, Eephus sets a 90s baseball era set in the small rural town of Douglas, Massachusetts. Everything from the sound of the crackling radio to the uniforms to the soldier field itself, it all feels authentically fit for its era in a nostalgic and comforting and welcoming manner. For myself, when a film is set in a period piece of sort, that being the 90s, which is kind of crazy to say that's a period piece, but it's over a quarter of a century, it can be hard to adapt to a world, especially when it's not something we don't live in a modern world. That being said, Eephus does this in such a natural and subtle way that you feel like you live in Douglas, Massachusetts yourself. You feel like you know the players on the field. You feel like you even know the restaurants and bars they talk about going to afterward. It just feels very natural and lived in. Speaking of the people within this film, Eephus is a masterclass in portraying the average small-town person. No, there's no Ryan Gosling featured or Ana de Armas. Rather, it's the people who look like you and me. The people you see in your typical rec league activities, which makes the film feel authentic as a result. Changing subjects to the themes of Eephus, this film lets you know from pretty much the first 10 seconds of it that this is the last ever game, and almost immediately you feel the sense of dread within the players and coaches, and you as a viewer almost feel it yourself. No, there's nothing they can do. It's the last ever game. All they can do is play the final 9 and give Soldiers Fields the send-off it deserves. And where Eephus particularly thrives is in showing this existential dread, showing the loss of community. Not everyone reacts the same to it. There's stages and levels of grief to it all. Throughout the duration of Eephus, you really see the stages of grief plastered on everybody. Some characters really get stuck in this, and they never progress to where they should be in the final level of acceptance. Starting off, everyone's obviously in denial. Is this really the last game? Surely we have one more Sunday to hit the ball around, right? And then quickly it turns into anger. 2 or 3 players end up leaving, never getting the proper send-off they deserve. And then bargaining kicks in. Well, we could play next year across town, but that would be a 45-minute drive one way. Do you want to make that? And then quickly it shifts into depression. As the last run scores, the last firework is shot, acceptance kicks in. There's nothing we can do but live the rest of our lives. Next up, I want to talk about, there are two very specific iconic scenes to me that I still think about to this day. And it's very clear that Carson Lund previously has been a cinematographer in his work, and it stands out here because you really see it thrive toward the end especially. The first of these moments that occur is when the sun dips below the surface, leaving the dark skies to take their place in the heavens. And well, wouldn't you know, the lights at Soldier Field harbors have already been cut off from the power grid. Not wanting to leave Soldier's Field with an uncompleted story, they turn to their cars and trucks to light up the diamond. It is just pure cinematic bliss that I love so much because it's something we don't see often. Simply, something as basic as the time of day becomes this antagonist of sorts. The darkness that surrounds this day is literal and symbolic. The second of these shots is Franny's last scene. Franny is definitely one of the characters I related to the most and I felt the most in myself. Franny is without a doubt, inarguably, the most dedicated of the bunch. And when he walks out into the darkness leaving Soldier's Field behind, only then is it when we truly know that it's all over. Next up, I want to talk about my favorite line from the movie Eephus. I always find a big quote that brings together the messaging of the film critically important to my enjoyment of it, something that you can think about for days afterward. And Eephus definitely has one of those moments. And Eephus is an abnormality of the baseball pitch anyways, and when the film manages to reference this very niche minor thing in baseball and combine it with the messaging and the theme of the movie, I find it really hits home.
The Eephus pitch is a type of curveball so unnaturally slow that it confuses the batter, makes him lose track of time. It's kind of like baseball. I'm looking around for something to happen. Poof, game's over.
When the final run crosses the plate to give us a walk-off walk, the most unsatisfying result in a baseball game, the Soldier's Field is closed, and the dread hits hard. The cars drive off, and the few who stick around in the dark watch the field get a send-off of fireworks that, notably, we don't get to see. And it fully hits you that this is it. There's no spring hope that's going to follow the long, dark Massachusetts winter. This is something that brought together a community for 30 years, and it's unceremoniously destroyed. And there's nothing we can do about it. One minor aside that I haven't seen much commentary regarding Eephus that stood out to me in particular is that adjacent to the baseball diamond being destroyed is a soccer field which is set to remain for the school's use. It's not a major aspect of the film, rather briefly mentioned 3 or 4 times. With all that being said, if you're watching Carson Lund, let me know. But as a sort of C-plot, if you will, I found that there was a message regarding soccer and baseball. That being that soccer is a growing game within America specifically. It's more accessible, cheaper to get into than a sport like baseball. And then baseball itself is constantly battling this narrative that it's a dying sport, true or not. And with that being said, soccer is obviously becoming more popular with newer generations. I still found there's a commentary about the passing of generations and the newer things that the generation introduces. At the end of the day, it's still very clearly a C-plot over anything, more so into referencing the passing of generations embedded with Eephus already. To conclude, Eephus ultimately feels like authentic filmmaking at its absolute finest. It feels so pure and innocent in a way that nothing has ever felt for me in quite some time. You can almost feel the care and passion put into it, and I highly recommend it if you're interested. Listen to a podcast by Carson Lund, I'll leave below down in the description, about how they set up the field, how they dealt with rain delays. There's very clearly a lot of passion put into this film. Even in the DVD release, the pack of cards that come along with it show a level of intent and care put into everything involving the production of Eephus. One undeniable aspect of Eephus that I haven't mentioned yet, the baseball verbiage, it's almost like baseball gore in a sense. It's very unapologetically this loudly baseball terminology in situations that maybe the person who only watches a baseball game once a year wouldn't quite pick up on. Despite being very oriented toward baseball fans, I still personally believe that a non-baseball fan can enjoy Eephus solely due to the themes and messaging around it. It just may not hit as hard or make as much sense, so definitely still give it a try if anything I said remotely intrigued you. Overall, Eephus, like I said, hits a really personal note with me. It will really make you appreciate all the small communities you're a part of. In a world full of continual distractions and everyone shouting at you and a lack of genuine human connection, Eephus is a film that gives you a minute to breathe and reflect on the small things that truly matter, the communities, the people. This film ultimately serves as a reminder to me to go actively engage in community, because it's not always going to be there, and I hope you get the same from watching it. Call your friends, call your family, and appreciate everything you're a part of, because it's not guaranteed tomorrow. Because one day, the lights will shut off, and all that's left are the memories.